and all over the state of Illinois, and quite frankly, all over the world. And we know that officials like Representative Ford and Lieutenant Governor Stratton are working hard with the rest of us to make sure that our citizens' needs are met. One of the ways that that is done is to ensure that you have appropriate resources at the governmental level. And so we understand that in that we are in the middle of a census count, how important this is. We understand that there have been undercounts historically in Black and brown communities. And we also know that many of the needs that we see and that are often met through government support occur in our communities. Needs like support in education, needs like support in food benefits and other benefits, but needs like infrastructure, the roads, the streets that we drive on, and the opportunity to get funding for community development block grants, which often support many of our institutions. And so we are honored to talk to you today about the census, tell you how you can help and why it's important that not only do you get counted, but your friends, relatives, and yes, some of your enemies, we want them to get counted as well. And so we're honored to be a part of this census count at the Chicago Urban League. I want to give a shout out to our census expert, Kareem Butler, who has been working all over the state with other affiliates, other Urban League affiliates in Aurora, Peoria, and in the southern part of the state. We understand how important this is. And so we will keep working until the end to make sure that everyone is counted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. We're so honored to be a part of this conversation with you today. I'm Dorri McWhorter. I'm the CEO of the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago. And we're so honored to be able to partner with the Chicago Urban League on this important convening. And I also want to thank our supporting organizations and our other partners, the NAACP Chicago Westside Branch, and our fellow regional intermediaries on the State of Illinois Census Grant. We have CAPS and Habilitative Systems, I apologize. And of course, thank you to all of the public officials with us today. I hope I don't miss anyone, but I've been looking at my screen here. So of course we have our wonderful Lieutenant Governor Stratton, Representative Robinson, Representative Ford, Commissioner Moore, Nubia Williams from the city of Chicago, as well as Shanta Wilkerson, who's running the state census grant and opportunity to make sure that we are all counted, including our enemies, Karen, as you've already said. So we thank all of you for being with us today, and please forgive me if I missed anyone on this big view here. So in case you didn't know, the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago is one of the oldest and largest community service organizations in our city. We're about 140 years old now. Our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women by promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And like our partner organizations, COVID-19 and its disproportionate impact on the Black and brown communities we serve has pressed us to even higher levels of urgency. As you all know, African Americans are disproportionately dying, disproportionately losing jobs and businesses, and disproportionately facing housing crisis. Our children, as Karen already mentioned, are disproportionately harmed by lost school days and the digital divide, which is jeopardizing their futures and the futures of our communities. COVID-19 has brought all of this into sharp focus, but as we know, none of it's new. We have seen these troubles before, and we have survived them. We will survive these troubles too. And as always, we will come out stronger on the other side. Participating in the 2020 census is crucial to us coming out stronger on the other side. Historically, the African American community is undercounted in the decennial census. When we are undercounted, our strength as a community is undercounted. Key programs that we know are so critically important, like health centers, public transit, schools, and telecommunications infrastructure, are also underfunded. Our political relevance is undercounted too. We cannot afford to be undercounted in any way. Understandably, keeping ourselves and our loved ones safe is taking up so much focus and energy, but we cannot let COVID-19 distract us from the census. Too much is at stake for the next decade. Besides keeping us safe, social distancing has created an opportunity to actually go complete our census form, so we don't have any excuses. So let's make them count us. So now it's my privilege to introduce my friend and our wonderful Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton. She's our state's 48th Lieutenant Governor. Among other things, she leads the state's Justice, Equity, and Opportunity Initiative. She was born and raised on the South Side of Chicago and previously represented her South Side community in the state legislature, and currently lives in Bronzeville with her husband and 4 daughters. We love to see all that amazing girl power. And although we know that her schedule won't allow her to stay for the entire program, we're so grateful to have her with us this morning. So welcome, Lieutenant Governor Stratton.
Thank you so much, Dorri, and thank you for not just that kind introduction, but thank you for the great work that you continue to do through the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago. I want to give a special thank you to the YWCA's Chief Equity Officer, Tina Hone, for the invitation to join this call today. And I too would like to acknowledge all of the partners who are hosting this very important event: the Chicago Urban League, CAPS, Habilitative Systems Inc, YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, NAACP Westside Branch. And I would also like to acknowledge the elected officials, all of whom I'm proud to consider friends, who have joined this call. And I just want to thank you all for your bold and strong leadership in these really challenging times. I want to acknowledge and thank Shawn Wilkerson for helping the state regional intermediaries, and of course, for all of the participants who have tuned in today. Thank you for taking the time to join this important conversation and for doing what I know you will do to make sure that we get a complete count in the 2020 census. Before I begin my formal remarks, I just want to pause just to say that I want you to know that I hope you and your families are well. I know that it has been a difficult time for all of us over the last couple of months that we've been in the midst of this global pandemic that just sort of swept across the globe. And I know that it has caused a lot of stress, a lot of adjustments, and unfortunately, a number of people who have either been sick or lost their lives. And chances are someone on this call has been directly and personally impacted. And I just want you to know you continue to be in our thoughts as we do this work to move us forward to restore Illinois. Today, we are here to talk about the importance of the 2020 census during the COVID-19 pandemic and what is at stake for the African American community. It won't come as news to anyone, and Dorri just mentioned this, that Black people are disproportionately contracting COVID-19 and are dying from it at a higher rate in just about every state where racial data is being tracked. There's an old saying, and it's not my saying, you've heard people say it for decades, but I think we've heard it more during this pandemic, that when America catches a cold, then Black America gets pneumonia. And this concept, again, is not new. This pandemic has highlighted disparities that have always been present, disparities that are rooted in structural racism, disparities that include access to a doctor, access to health insurance, disparities around housing and education, disparities around access to nutritious food and mental health services, and that's just to name a few. We are also, as a Black community, more likely to be exposed during this pandemic because studies have shown that up to 80% of us are unable to work remotely or work from home during a stay-at-home order because we are essential workers. Whether the society has acknowledged us as essential or not, we have always been essential workers, and that did not just come up because of this pandemic. And then when the federal government says that a majority of job loss is in households with incomes of $40,000 or less, we know that the economic loss to the Black community is also disproportionate. The census is an opportunity for our state to receive funding and resources and services for the communities that need it the most. And an inaccurate count would deprive our most vulnerable communities of valuable dollars and vital dollars for schools, for social services, for hospitals, for SNAP benefits, and other community-oriented resources needed for our communities to survive and to thrive. The stakes could not be greater for the state of Illinois, but neither could our dedication to counting every single resident. Based on the census count, Illinois receives an estimated $34 billion each year. But I want everyone to understand this number. If we undercount just by 1% in 2020, if we undercount by 1%, it could result in Illinois losing over $195 million in federal funds. That's just with a 1% undercount. So imagine if it went greater than that. And I don't know about you, but if there's anything that this pandemic has shown us all, we knew it before, but this pandemic has highlighted that we really can't afford to not have all of the resources that our communities need. So I'm proud to say that the magnitude of the risk of an undercount has been outmatched by our state's dedication to this effort. Illinois has committed $29 million, by far the largest per person investment made by any state in the nation this year to prepare for and execute the census. We know that these top-down state resources are not enough, and that's why we are locking arms with the United States Census Bureau and local nonprofits, private foundations, schools, municipalities, community leaders like all of you on this call to make sure that we can build engagement into this year's count. I know that at times the challenges that we are facing may seem insurmountable. In addition to a global pandemic that we are living in, there was already a rampant mistrust in government and a fear of being counted among immigrants, including African immigrants. And right here in Illinois, there's nearly 42% of our Black residents, 33% of our Latino residents, and 20% of children under the age of 5, which live in hard to count communities. Other hard to count communities include the elderly, those living in rural communities, individuals who are housing insecure, and individuals with mental and or physical disabilities. And as I said before, we cannot afford to fail these communities because, as I mentioned, it would be devastating, not just for the most vulnerable populations, but it would be devastating for our entire state and region. So the bottom line is that the US Census and the 2020 Census is really an issue of equity. We need to bring as many resources to our state, and we mostly need to bring as many resources as we can to our most vulnerable communities. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm sure there'll be more discussed during this call, but first and foremost, make sure that all of your friends, all of your neighbors, all of your family members, and the seniors in your community complete the 2020 census. When I completed my census form, it took me less than 10 minutes to complete the form. So here are a couple of resources. You can call to complete your census. 844-330-3030. 844-330-3030. You can go online to complete your census, which is what I did. And I went to my2020census.gov. my2020census.gov. There are some people, by the way, who say, well, what about that PIN number on the envelope? You can complete your census even if you don't have that PIN number. Maybe you misplaced the envelope. Get online, call, and if you have any questions, you can text 987-987. Text 987-987 if you have any questions. The other thing that I just wanted to mention before I close is that the United States Census is looking for credible messengers to assist with ensuring that we get a complete count. And that's important because we need those who will go into communities or who will reach out to those who need to fill out their census form and make sure that it's been completed. But there are a lot of communities that won't trust just anybody making that call to them. They need people that they can connect with because they are from their community. So in the Black community, we need Black people who are helping to get the count out, getting the count, complete count. So if you're interested in being one of those credible messengers and working with the census, text the word job, J-O-B, to 987-987, job to 987-987. And from what I can recall, I think it's a pretty decent pay as well. So in these trying times, this would be a great opportunity for someone who is looking for employment. We will get through this crisis and we will get through it together. But the disparities that I've mentioned are likely to continue long after this virus as we continue to get past the immediate threat of this virus and where we're still working through this stay-at-home order. So therefore, it's imperative that we all make sure that we get a complete count in the 2020 census. I just want to thank all of you for everything you're doing to make sure that we get this done. Somebody just said that the salaries start at $26.50 an hour to $29.50 an hour. So that goes back to what I said. But thank you all. Thanks for what you're doing. And most of all, recognize that the census is one of the best ways that we can help people in our community in a time that we may all feel so helpless. Thanks for hosting this important conversation. I'm now going to hand it off to Sheryl Holman, CEO of CAPS Inc. Thank you, everyone.
Well, there we are. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. You are so passionate and we love you. Don't ever forget it because you speak to the people and you say what we need to hear. And that's what I'm here today to talk about is the census. You've heard a lot of facts about it and what we have at stake and what's so necessary. But what you really need to understand is that if you're not counted, you're paying for funds to go to other communities. That's why you don't have hospitals. That's why your roads are potholes or whatever is going on, because your tax dollars are going to other communities. And why? Because you're not counted. You're not there. So instead of saying there are 5,000 people in your neighborhood, they're saying there's 100 because only 100 filled out the census. So when you see that FICA money and how much you pay every week, it goes somewhere else. It's not helping your community. And our communities need so much. And that's how we get left out. It's a system. It's a systematic process. So when we apply for funds, agencies, Community Assistance Program is a workforce development agency. And we provide services throughout the South Side and our South Side census. And now we are working with the South Suburban, Southland census process, and we are sponsoring about 30 different agencies and so many different trusted messengers to get this message out to you. But if you don't understand what you individually have at stake, then you think the census is not where it's just another piece of paper. The government's trying to get in my business. Everybody's saying this, everybody's saying that, but that's all part of the process of how we've been undercounted. Because if you don't fill out the census, forget about what everybody says, because they cannot use your information for anything but to count you and whatever housing you're in or those statistics, because this is what happens. We use that information. When we apply for funding in the community, we use that information. But if they see there's only 10 people there, why would they give us funding to help when we know there's 1,000 people there, but only 10 people filled out the census? So that's the message that we need to pass on to everyone. And then there are so many hard to count populations that don't speak English well. They need to be counted. People who are homeless that are on the street, they don't have a phone or they don't have, we need to help everybody get counted. So if you fill out your information online, we thank you so very much. But there are so many other people that have not filled out this information because they don't have the logistics, the phone, the internet, or even they didn't mail them anything. You need to gather up those people. If someone is couch surfing, you know they're in your house, they need to be counted. Everybody has to be counted. Do not be fooled by the rhetoric saying that you don't get counted if you're not a citizen, or you don't get counted, or it's not, my count does not make any difference and nobody cares. Everyone cares, especially those of us who need new hospitals in our community. We need better schools. We need more money to support our infrastructures, to make sure that we have everything that's needed. So I really want to inspire everyone to do those things and to understand that it is important to make sure that we're being counted and that everyone is part of the census, and that we can stop this historical undercounting of the brown and Black communities in our city, in our state, and in our country. This is a movement. Please just do your part. Fill it out. Help 10 other people do that too. So I guess I am to introduce my friend and colleague, and we've met recently, and I really, really believe that he's doing a great job for us, and we can expect great things in the future. Representative LAMONT Robinson.
Representative Robinson, are you unmuted?
All right. Good morning. Thank you for that warm introduction. I am honored to be on this panel this morning as we discuss the census and how extremely important it is for our community to make sure that we get counted. We know that we are in a state of emergency in the African American community right now during COVID. And so it is even more reason that we need to make sure that we get everyone counted. We are going to be in the fight of our lives for funding in the state of Illinois, particularly in the African American community. And so it is even more reason, again, that we need everyone to get counted. It is great that we have the Urban League on board, that we have the NAACP on board, Representative Ford and I, the Lieutenant Governor and I. We need your support. We cannot do all of this work alone. We have to have our organizations. We have to have our churches to fight, to get the word out, to educate our folks that, again, we are in a state of emergency in the state of Illinois when it comes to the African American community. We need every single dollar that's coming to us to move our communities forward, to open businesses back, to make sure that folks are being able to have quality education, to make sure that folks have quality hospitals, access to healthcare. These are things that we are struggling with now. And during COVID, COVID has pulled the sheet back on all of the things that are affecting our community as it relates to poverty. So again, this is even more reason that we need to make sure that we get everyone counted, that we use our organizations, we use our churches to make sure that we get the word out. And so again, I'm honored to be on this call today. I wish everyone a great weekend, excuse me, as we continue this fight for making sure our community gets counted. God bless. And I would like to turn it over to the NAACP Westside Chapter.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, we're all muted.
Oh, okay. This is Karl Brinson, President of Westside Branch in NAACP. It's a pleasure to be in the presence of all these great minds and great leaders. One thing I say, as community stakeholders, I think we have to do a better job in the efforts to reach our hard to count community members and also our hard-headed community members. what we were doing and what we were trying to do out west on the west side, we've been doing a dual campaign where we've just been launching this dual campaign talking about the importance of the census and also the dangers of COVID. So the message that we're trying to convey to our people, first we're trying to educate, and also we're trying to motivate, and at the end of the day, trying to get our people to participate in this census process and let them know how important it is to be counted and what it means to us dealing with when it comes to education, improving our education systems. What it means to us when it talks about improving our recreational resources and places to recreate at. And also, plus in this era, in this time of this COVID pandemic, what it means to have the access to healthcare and clinics. So we've been trying to do this, putting a dual press on this campaign, making it as we speak about the importance of the census, but also trying to speak about the importance of the COVID. And I think at this time, as stakeholders, as community stakeholders in this campaign, in this challenge that we're faced with, I think we have to think outside the box about how we're going to reach our hard to count community members and our hard-headed community members. We have to use other mechanisms and other tools at our disposals to reach these individuals. One of the things that we see that we've been trying to use out west to try to reach this population of our people that we know has been very effective, we've been using yard signs. We also have been using phone banking. We've been doing phone banking. But one of our best tools that we've been using to try to educate and to motivate and to get our people to participate has been our mobile van. That we have had some success in going to our neighborhoods where we're talking to our hard-hit community members on those corners, where we pull up on the corner using this van, this system, to sit there on the corner in these hot spots, because our people are still hanging out. That's our hard to count community, our hard-headed community members. We sit there with our vehicle and we run these PSAs using community people, community voices from various backgrounds with people who reside in the community to talk about the importance of census, why they need to be counted, to talk about this COVID outbreak, why you need to practice social distancing. We talk about how it contracts you and how it affects people in the household. One of the mottos that we use in our campaign, in this dual campaign, our slogan is stay inside, stay alive, and let's get counted. We're being quarantined, so there's no reason why we can't fill out that census information now. So that's the way we're trying to reach and trying to teach and trying to motivate and trying to get our people to participate in this process. We know how serious it is. What we're speaking to the choir here today as we speak to each other, but we have to do a greater effort as stakeholders to get out there among our people using social distancing and to teach, educate, and to try to get our folks to participate in the census process and to practice safe distance dealing with COVID in this very difficult times. So I just wanted to share that with you. I just want to commend us for what we're doing. Like I said, we just got to put up more energy and more effort into our hard to reach population and our hard-headed community members. So just to say thank you. Look forward to continuing this work. I know we got a great challenge in front of us. So I'm just going to pass this off to one of my brothers in the struggle, my pal in the pew at church, and my state representative, Shawn K. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. President, Karl Brinson, and your entire Westside Branch. I want to first start by thanking the president of the Urban League. I don't know how Chicago scored so big, but we are so lucky to have been able to land Ms. Freeman. So welcome to Chicago, and thank you for all that you're doing and that you will do for the city of Chicago. I want to thank Kareem for being diligent and making those phone calls to make sure that we be on this call. And Kathy Kane Willis, I always call her KKW. Thank God she didn't have that extra K and there was a W there. She was very diligent also. But I also want to thank Dorri, because Dorri, I used to bring my daughter all the way from the west side of Chicago to the YWCA because your programs are excellent. So my daughter is 16 now, and she learned a lot over there at the YWCA on the south side of Chicago. My message is concurrent with everyone's message that's been stated. And I think that if we could just remember that there was this thing called the 3/5 compromise, when Black people were only counted as a 3/5 of a person. We must remember that and recognize that many people died, many people struggled, many people fought to make sure that Black people were treated fairly and were counted as a whole person. That's enough for us to make sure that we send a message that we as a people should be counted as a whole and take the census. I took my census, and I'm very proud to say that my family, we're taking the census, and it only took a few minutes. I also want to say that the census has multiple purposes. One, it sends a strong message of the strength in numbers. You know, Black, brown, whoever you are, political power is bestowed upon communities where people are counted. And so, of course, we know that it's going to give us more revenue from the federal government, but it also gives us a lot of political power as state representatives, as senators, as the urban league, as the NAACP, and all the organizations that's fighting to make sure that there's a complete count. It gives us ammunition to go out and say that we need more revenue because we have people that we have to take care of. It also sends a strong political message for people. The political message is these people will vote, and there are a lot of people that's in these communities and they will vote. And so when we have a complete count, it sends a political message and a financial statement for our communities. So I think that it's critical that we just send a message that we are a whole people, and that people have died for us to be counted just as a whole person, and we cannot pass up the opportunity to be counted as a whole person. And finally, I would say that what COVID has done is given us all a chance to come together just like this. And I hope that this coalition that has been built across the state of Illinois will continue to hold together to fight for the disparities that we are seeing in plain view. The disparities that we always known, but now we have many people saying what we've been saying for a very long time, that Blacks and Browns people are most vulnerable and they have underlying conditions. And so now we have some a weapon, we have something that we could go on because it's been stated many, many times and we're saying it every day. So hopefully this coalition will stay together and work with the state delegation at the state level and the county and the city and demand more for our people. And I'm there with you. And I know that Representative Lamont Robinson is also. And so with that, I would like to introduce our HSI president and CEO, who is diligent, just like most of you and all of you every day. I know it's a burning feeling that you have when you're dealing with this census. And I know I see it with HSI and the Westside NAACP and all of you as you continue to try to get a complete count. So with that, I would like to introduce President Donald Dew from HSI. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Representative Ford. I truly appreciate that introduction. And also let me thank you for all of your service that you've been providing on behalf of the state of Illinois citizens. And let me also just highlight the fact that Representative Ford has been very, very passionate about this issue for a very, very long time. The issue of being counted and having fair representation. He has been fighting for legislation in our General Assembly for over a decade to ensure that persons who have been incarcerated are actually counted from their communities of origin. And that has been, in fact, part of the challenge that we've been facing. That part of the issue around the hard to count population is that we have lost potential populations of folk due to incarceration. So simply put, why shouldn't those folks who are currently incarcerated be counted from North Lawndale, Inglewood, Austin, Garfield, where they have come from? Right now, unfortunately, those downstate communities benefit from those persons being incarcerated. We just need a fair count. As we strive to do this, this is critically important. So Representative Ford, I salute your efforts in this regard. Don't stop, because it's going to happen. Again, my name is Donald Dew. I'm President and CEO of Habilitative Systems Inc. And HSI is a comprehensive behavioral health and human service organization that has been serving Chicagoland communities since 1978. We grew out of Clare Christian United Methodist Church as part of their community ministry. And we started with just a handful of programs and have grown to over 40 programs in 15 different locations. Now, what is important at this point in time is for me to emphasize over and over again the importance of not only us coming together, but as Representative Ford has said, us staying together. You know, we must salute our governor, our lieutenant governor, all the statewide regional intermediaries, all of the sub-recipients, and all the contractors and vendors who have been a part of this effort. But we cannot let this effort, this coalition, die. This is an example of how we can come together and make a difference in our communities on the southwest sides of Chicago, in every county, in every district in the state. We can make a difference when we come together. Now, I'm just very, very pleased that we were able to bring a coalition of folks together, 18 initial organizations entitled the Counting on Chicago Coalition 2020. What's interesting about this coalition is that each one of these organizations has history, and I underline history, of being in the grassroots, in the trenches, providing essential services to persons for 40, 50, 60 years or more. These are folks who have been tried and tested and have a heart and passion for community service, for servant leadership. It has been a privilege to work with all these sub-recipients, and now that number has grown to over 30. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, we must thank the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Illinois Department of Human Services for giving us the opportunity to bring this type of coalition together to have this type of impact. One of the things that I also want to emphasize about our coalition, in the fall of last year, we began conversations about the fact that since this effort was being led by the Illinois Department of Human Services, clearly we needed to begin and engage in dual messaging even at that time. So last year, 2019, we were talking about the fact that we're not going to just ask people to be counted and participate in the census, but we're also going to be doing social determinants of health screening. So we're going to be, and have been since that time, making a determination about the other basic human needs that people have to have addressed. Since the advent of COVID-19, it's gone to another level, of course, and that is making sure that people are tested, that people are safe, that they are getting the types of essential services that they and their family members need to be able to be healthy and whole. So now we find that in every effort, for example, with our local officials, our aldermen have been giving out masks, and our elected officials have been giving out food. Again, dealing with the basic human needs of the individuals. Our coalition has joined every elected official, every church effort. We've been doing Census Sundays, everything possible to ensure that we get to the folks, first of all, to make sure that they're protected, that they're safe, that their basic human needs are being addressed, and then, of course, importantly, being counted, because the message here is that you do count, we do care, and we don't want to stop for 1 minute with this effort of making sure that everybody is given an opportunity to have a say-so and going forward. The other part of this messaging that is so critically important is that, as also has been indicated, you know, the notion of disparities, this crippling effect in our community, and understanding that everything that is going on right now with COVID-19 is hitting the African-American community in a more desperate type of a way. Lieutenant Governor mentioned earlier, when America gets a cold, the African-American community gets pneumonia. And that is so prevalent. When we look at the people that we've been serving for over 40 plus years, people with mental illness, substance use disorder, people with developmental disabilities, people in poverty, I am concerned about the fact that we've got persons who have been victims of domestic violence who are becoming even more abused. We've got children who have been victims of child abuse who may also be at risk. So this is serious. COVID is having a tremendous impact in the African American community in the most adverse way. All of these ills, all of the concerns that we've had about the lack of an intact safety net and social fabric in our community is being exacerbated in the African American community because of COVID-19. So it is most definitely an issue that is impacting us. This is a call to action in the most desperate kind of a way. This is a time for us to stand in a way that we never stood before. History will judge us in this moment. What did we do in this moment to lift up our people? We cannot stand by and blame the victim and say that you're a victim of your own circumstances. No, this is not the time to do that. We must support each other, lift each other, and make sure that we're all counted. I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for this coalition. I thank the Chicago Urban League for bringing us all together this morning and all of our partners, because we've got to keep on keeping on no matter what. At this time, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce to you Cook County Commissioner Stanley Moore of the 4th District. Mr. Moore has been in this position for over 7 years, and his record speaks for himself. And I'm also glad that he comes from Good Start. His daddy led the charge for the census many, many, many years ago. So Stanley Moore, thank you so much.
Thank you, Donald. I want to thank you for all that you do, especially with the services that you provide the community, the organization that you guys have done. And I want to thank you for being a part of this coalition and fighting for the census since the inception. We started this endeavor almost 2 years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago now. I want to thank Habilitative Systems. I want to thank the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago, the Chicago Westside Branch, NAACP, the Chicago Urban League, and I want to thank my colleagues, Representative LaShawn Ford. Many don't realize, but 3 years ago when I first started advocating for dollars for the census, you were there. You were there singing the same song that I was singing and saying that we have to do this. I also want to thank a couple other people that I don't see mentioned on here, but Representative Tepetti. He was instrumental in helping us put together the first bill that asked the governor to fund the census for $33 million. I want to thank Juliana Stratton, Senator Kim Lightford, Congressman Danny Davis. Can't forget Congressman Danny Davis, very instrumental in helping us push the needle forward with trying to get funding for the Census Bureau. I want to thank President Tony Preckwinkle and definitely Karl Brinson, Westside NAACP, and not to mention, don't let me leave out Operation Push, Jeanette Wilson. She also was very, very instrumental. Tina Home, YMWCA. I want to thank all of you guys for the work that you've done to push the needle forward. My father was the director of the U.S. Census Bureau for longer than most of us have been alive, and he is the grandfather of the Census Bureau. He started in the Census Bureau in the early 60s, late 50s. He was a computer programmer by trade who was hired on in Washington, D.C. to go around the country, travel the country, and teach different cities how to set up the very first UNIVAC computer so that they could put this Census Bureau on a database. And at that time, and I think I have it. Hold on, I'm gonna show it right here. This is my father's first UNIVAC reel-to-reel of the Census Bureau. This is from the late 1957-58, the Census Bureau, when they first decided to computerize the census. And my father has kept that on his shelf for many years. So when you talk about the history of the Census Bureau, I get it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm very thankful for him and all the work that he has done to do that. Juliana Stratton, she hit it home. She said exactly what I would have said in my notes about how important it is that we are counted. Typically, my father has said to me time and time again that 65% of the population will be counted with public media outreach and campaigns. 65%. He said, I don't care what else you try to change, that has been the number consistently throughout history, that with marketing, media, and all of the work that we do, 65% of our population will be counted with public media outreach. But then there's that 20%. And that 20% is usually picked up in what we call enumeration. Those are people that go out. The Census Bureau hires thousands and thousands of workers to follow up and go door to door and knock on people's doors and literally ask them to participate, to fill out those forms. And typically, the Census Bureau has always hired people who look like us, who live in our communities, who we can relate to, who we have a trust for, that will not open the door because they recognize people in their own community. That is the 20% that has always been picked up by the Census Bureau in enumeration. We are not sure, and I'm going to have to ask Corey Stevenson, I see he's on the line, where are we with enumeration and how are we going to do enumeration now? Are we going to turn to, like we're doing with COVID, the contact tracing? Are we going to have people that are hired from the Census Bureau to actually call people at home and follow up with phone calls and emails and things of that nature if we can't go door to door? That's a very important question. But then, you remember I said 65% public media campaign, 20% enumeration, but then there's that 15%. There's still 15% on the table. And guess what? That 15% is typically what we like to call hard to count. You're not going to get them through marketing, media, TV, internet. That is already covered in the 65%. You're not going to get them with the enumeration. That's that 20%. How do we get that 15%? We get that 15% just like we do political campaigns, door to door, people that recognize their church leaders, non-for-profit communities, food banks, getting out into the community and making sure that they understand that they must be counted. These are not your typical people who watch TV or playing on Facebook. These are people that particularly are more difficult to go after. They're apartment dwellers. They move often. They're people with language barriers or a distrust for the government. Those are people that are typically don't like to share their information. They are the hard to count populations. And the only way to get them is through ambassadors and trusted voices and people in the community who they feel that they can trust and will listen to. And that's why this call is so important. And that's why I'm glad to be on here today, because when you talk about the population of the Chicago Urban League and who they touch, who the YMCA touches, who the WYMCA touches, who the Chicago Westside Branch of the NAACP, who they touch, who Operation Push touches, those are hard to count populations. And that's why it is more important and imperative that we have good leadership. We want to welcome Karen Freeman. We've been waiting for you to come on board. We're so excited to be working with you. I think you're going to be sitting on my commission at Cook County, because that's a seat for the president of the CEO of the Chicago Urban League on the Cook County board. But this is so important because it is you that's going to help us to go after that 15%. I just want everybody to keep those numbers in mind, though, because a lot of times those lines get blurred. We think that, oh, well, because COVID is here, we'll just put the rest of the money in a commercial. You're missing that 15% if you put the rest of that money in a commercial. You have to reach out to people that are hard to reach out to. I've seen some great examples, and I think that we should have another one of these meetings with all of our grantees to find out what are the ways that they are reaching their populations. For example, I had a church that's had a designated person in the church to call every single registered member of that church. And they had a spreadsheet, and that person would call them and say, how are you doing? Is everybody healthy? Do you have groceries? Do you have food? And have you filled out your census form? And if they've done all those things, then they check them off and they move on to the next person. That church will have 100% participation because they are making sure that, and they said that they're going to keep calling them back until they fill out the census form. So that's the type of grassroots effort that we're talking about.
Commissioner Moore, we are so grateful for your participation. It's Tina, and I thought we was tight. You didn't call my organization YMCA twice. YWCA.
YWCA. You know,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we only have a few more minutes left, and we have 2 more speakers. I am so grateful for serving on the commission you just mentioned, and so grateful for everything you do. But we have Nubia Willman from the city, and we have the wonderful Shanta Wilkerson from the state to clean up. And then we've got so many questions in this chat room. I just don't know if we're going to be able to get to them. But, and so I wanted to thank you for being here today. And I do forgive you for calling me YMCA. But wondered if you could wrap up, and then should we just turn this over to Nubia?
No, I'm done. I'm done. But I just wanted to make sure that I brought forward those names and made sure that they were acknowledged, because I didn't hear those names earlier. But they were definitely instrumental in helping us get to the 33 million, the 29 million that the governor likes to say, but it's actually 33 million. So thank you guys.
Count every penny.
Every penny.
Thank you, Commissioner. Nubia?
Yes, hi.
I know you're here.
I'm here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Commissioner, for that really great overview of that strategic outreach that is so necessary for this community. We're so excited about what the county has been doing. And here, as the representative for the city, my name is Nubia Willman. I'm the director for the Office of New Americans, and I help lead the city census efforts out of Mayor Lightfoot's office. So very briefly, the community leaders here have already said everything I could have said and better. We know that the census is so important, an accurate count is so important, especially right now in the midst of this crisis. We see the need for accurate data in order to be able to distribute resources in an accurate and equitable way. So we know that it's important. And not only is the census important because of the resources that it provides our communities, the resources that we use day to day, whether that be the libraries, the schools, the CTA, or the social service programs that we use on a daily basis. It's not just important because of the congressional representation that we need with an accurate count. I also want to put forth this suggestion and idea. The census is important, especially for us here in Chicago, because it allows us to see what the fabric of the city actually looks like. It lets us see who actually lives in Chicago, what do Chicagoans look like, what do they do, who's running the city. And if we don't have an accurate count, it won't paint an accurate picture of who's really here. So if you love being in Chicago, if you love being a Chicagoan, if you love the city, it's a really important tool for you to use as a civic engagement form to say, I'm here, my family is here, we matter, and we're making ourselves count. And so it's very important that we all motivate each other in our communities to get the census completely filled in an accurate count. The city is 50% there. We still have a ways to go. Please visit our city website if you want information on how you can get involved. To Commissioner Moore's point, we have some phone banking opportunities where you can call or text your community members that's being run through Chicago Cares, and that would be a great way for you to do that person-to-person interaction in this very limited time where we can't actually go door to door or have those community events. So that's just one example of things that you could do with the city. I don't want to take up too much time because I know there's other questions, so I want to kick it over to my census sister, Shanta Wilkerson, who is the state's co-director of the state census program. Shanta.
Hi, sister. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I was trying to juggle. It's our panel meeting today. Just ended. It's always the third Friday of each month. I'm excited to be here. I want to thank YWCA and Urban League and the Westside NAACP, HSI, and CAPS for putting this together. Of course, I'm super excited because YWCA, HSI, and CAPS are our grantees. And so I'm like, yay, a proud mom. I do want to say that we are doing a lot of collaboration with the city and the county. I feel like I talk to them more than I talk to some of my family members. That could be a good or bad thing. And so we are trying to work together, utilize our resources, and make sure that we're hitting all the areas that we need to hit. And so I'm grateful and I'm glad that Illinois is number 8. Last week we had a little stint where we were number 7, which was exciting to see. And we can do better, right? We are at 64.2%, but which is still good compared to the national average, and knowing that in 2010 our final numbers were 70.5, right? So we're not that far away for beating the 2010 goal. So I just want everybody to know that it's important to get counted, as you know. And I always say this, and obviously I'm a Black woman, and that's important to me. And you know, when the census first started, Black and brown people were counted as 3/5 of a person, right? And so now that we are whole, we need to make the government see us, count us, and give our states the resources that we deserve. And so if nothing else, if you need to be counted because of that, make the government see you and count you. I think that is it, but thank you for having me. We are working on with the state legislator our census budget for next year. We want to continue this work with our grantees now that we know that the self-response period is going to be extended to October. We had originally thought we would have our grantees work through June this year, but we're going to need them to work through October. And I'm not sure if the city or the county will continue, but we know that we need to. And so we're going to work together. We have some exciting things coming up in June with the city and the county, highlighting certain dates like Juneteenth, Black Census Day. So that's exciting. So yes, if you have any questions or any information you need, you can reach out to me. If it's state specific, obviously Nubia for city and the county. So thank you all. Thank you to the legislators who are showing up and showing out. We know that you all are the motivators. The Census Bureau has told us that the legislators are the #1 motivators to get people to do things. And so we need you guys to continue to show up. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Shanta. We're so appreciative of all the work that you're doing, and we know that you're the hardest working sister in census across America, so thank you for everything that you're doing. So I know that we're at time. We have so many wonderful questions, but I'll just wrap quickly and hand it over to my friend Karen. But to let you know, we're taking all of the questions out of the chat, and we will post those questions on the Facebook feed for this to make it easy and accessible for everyone to see. And so keep putting your questions in there in the last few minutes, and we'll make sure that we save the chat and get those questions answered. Thank you again to all of the legislators and our government officials. We're so appreciative of everything that you're doing to get folks out to be counted. And we will absolutely work to make them count us. So thank you all. On behalf of the YWCA, we say it doesn't work without the W. So, so we make sure that we're getting everyone out as best as we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to my sister, Karen.
Thank you so much, Dorri, and thanks so much for your leadership at the YWCA, and a special thanks to all of our partners at HSI, the Westside Chapter of the NAACP, CAPS, and the Southside Community Organizations, all of the partners who have come together not just to make this discussion a success, but who are working hard with the census. We are so grateful for the leadership of our elected officials, those who spoke today, and those who were also on and have been fighting for the census to ensure an accurate count. Earlier this week, the Urban League published a paper called An Epidemic of Inequities: Structural Racism and COVID-19 in the Black Community. And it really underscores why it is so important for us to have an accurate count in the census. We talked about the social determinants of health, economics, housing, how and where you're employed, the fact that you don't get to shelter at home. The only way we can address these underlying issues and the way that they have impacted Black and Brown communities is to ensure that we have the resources available so that we can advocate for those resources. And so we thank you for your work in this area. The reality is because this has been delayed, we've only just begun. So we need you to roll up our sleeves, and whether we continue to have to shelter in place or whether we begin to come out in a gradual way, we know that we continue to need to work. We have to continue to work on the census. So thanks to everyone for your time, and to the organizers, and let's get counted, because we know that it absolutely matters.